Well, we continue to reflect on the life and times of the late Archbishop Desmond Tutu. The Nobel laureate has been praised both locally and internationally for his part in ending apartheid. To speak more about Tutu's legacy, we're now joined by Mr. David Mosoma, Chairperson of the Commission for Rights of Cultural, Religious and Linguistic Communities. Always a pleasure talking to you, Mr. Mosoma, and good morning to you. But I suppose my first question to you being, what was your initial reaction upon hearing of the passing of Ubab Desmond Tutu?
Well, my initial reaction was a great loss for the country, especially a person of moral courage who was able to confront both the ills of apartheid and the ills of current modern political order, confronting it in such a way that he sought to ensure that justice prevails as a precondition for building a society in which everybody has a fair share and is equal in terms of both opportunities and what the country provides. And what I also thought very deeply was that this did not come very easy of the arch. And many people think that he just emerged as a leader who is internationally renowned. But I do know that even in his own church, he was not a revered person. He was a lone voice. And his emergence to the international and public scene was a consequence of his appointment as the Secretary General of the South African Council of Churches. And that exposure, of course, which is linked up with his own learning. Remember, he was the lecturer at the Federal Theological Seminary in Alice. Fortunately, I became a student a year after he left. But of course, his teaching remained. A person who linked liturgy and work, liturgy and transformation, worship and the struggles of the people, which many leaders of churches today are not able to do that. Because deepening an understanding of liturgy as a filling station where you are empowered and filled so that you can do the work of justice in the struggles for human fulfillment and human liberation. And this set him aside. And the issue of courage was, of course, a deep sense of faith and spirituality, but not spirituality as inwardness. It was inwardness which was expressed in practical action.
Right. Because
it gives an expression and embodiment of what it means when the gospel says faith without action is useless.
Right.
And he lived that, which is what each and every Christian is called upon to do. That's why the church must remain the moral compass of society. If the church loses that moral compass of society, society is doomed. And hence he lifted up that which is required in terms of the mandate of the gospel to which he believed.
Prof, on that note, I want to also touch on his commitment, for universal humanity of all people. As you mentioned before, he was a man who would not mince his words. He was a man of great discipline, prayer, reminding me even just yesterday hearing Bishop Stephen Moreo saying that, he had such a strict and disciplined time of prayer, whether it's in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening, and you would need to find your way in his schedule, in his what he calls his rhythm of life, if you wanted to see him and speak to him. But he also seemed to have mastered the skill of translating prayer into action and also advocating, in terms of his commitment to equality for all. Take me through that commitment and discipline that you have also witnessed.
What is important is the belief to love the unloved. I think that premised his theological, ethical way of life, and of course prayer as well, because it actually explains that humanity, or men and women, are created in the image of God. That in seeing human beings suffer, you see God suffer. In other words, you don't have to wait for an angel to come and say God exists. The face of God is in the face of those who suffer, those who are exploited, those who are marginalized, those who are trivialized in the world. And that, I think, formed the basis of his thinking and his prayer for life.
Yeah. With that being said, Prof, I want to also reflect on a time in his life, which, according to your statement as the CRL, you call it a time in which he had to process the most painful testimonies shared by many people. I'm referring here to the time during the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. We know that he has received criticism at the same time, with some expecting a different outcome. But I want to touch on your perspective, where you are of the view that in spite of all that rather transpired, he still believed that South Africa was a rainbow nation and we needed to, sort of embrace its unique diversity. Take me through that time and the role that you think, the Archbishop played during the TRC.
Remember that Truth and Reconciliation Commission, in my view, had two roles. One was the political role, and one was the reconciliation role, where truth and justice must collide. In other words, where peace and justice work together, you have a just society. Now, the one part which is political was supposed to be executed by the politicians. Of course, after that report was given to the political principals, the political principals were supposed to do, to excavate, excavation of truth so that justice can prevail. Now, the failure to do that cannot be blamed on him. The second part is the reconciliation. That the reconciliation means restoration of human life, a restoration of that which was taken away from those who suffer, to restore human dignity. How do you do that? You do that by creating a spirit of sharing. Remember that reconciliation cannot happen without repentance. The preconditions for it is the repentance. You admit the guilt. You say, I've done wrong. Now I'm prepared to start anew. And how can we do it together to build a lasting, durable country in which each and every person has got a space of life and a space of existence? And I think one must look at this thing in this way, the way in which I've described them, so that he felt much more comfortable in the area of reconciliation, where there must be repentance, where justice must prevail as a consequence of that.
With that being said, Prof, my last question to you before I let you go, then briefly, if you may, what legacy do you think the Archbishop leaves behind, and what baton does he also leave for those who are left behind to continue with?
First, courage. We must speak the truth with love. We must speak the truth with empathy, embracing each other. Because after all, despite our differences, we belong and we love and we need each other. That's why it is said, united we stand, divided we fall. As a nation, we need each other. And therefore, there are challenges in this country. These challenges require our collective efforts across the board, be it political, be it economic, be it land. It requires all of us to say how best to stop that which has marginalized majority of our people. How do we make a country which is human-centered? The whole idea of Ubuntu. How do we affirm each other's humanity in order to make South Africa one of the prime countries in the world? Because we have what it takes. But the problem is the cacophony of voices of people who are going different directions without looking at the center of what it is that can unite us and build this country together. And I think this is the legacy that the Arch has left behind for us.
And with those strong words, I have to thank you for joining us this morning. Professor David Mosoma, always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for your time, the chairperson of the CRL Commission.